Good morning. Welcome back to Passionate World Radio Network. Distinguish yourself from the ordinary. And this morning, on Lillian's interviews, Lillian Cauldwell will be interviewing 4 authors from the International Miami Book Festival that takes place in Miami, Florida, during the last week and a half of November. And you should not miss it. So our first author this morning is Walter Shapiro, who wrote the novel called Hustling Hitler, the Jewish vaudevillian who fooled the Führer. Good morning, Walter. How are you?
Well, good, Lillian. It's a pleasure to be on the air with you, but I will say it's not a novel. It's a true story.
Okay, it's a true story, but it read like a novel. So.
Well, I tried to write it like a novel, but everything is verifiable with news clips and legal documents. And Hustling Hitler, and so many people might get confused by the title, is not a Holocaust book. It's really a rollicking American book, much closer in spirit to the producers than, say, God forbid, Schindler's List.
Yes, but the fact of the matter is that somebody in the Jewish faith had a great sense of humor, but more than that, he had a sleight hand, and he knew how to combine the two together to be other than a rabbi, a doctor, or a banker.
No, so much of Jewish history is either the father working in the garment factory of the Jewish for 3 days a week, going to shul on the 7th day, and dreaming about sending his son to medical school. Or there are too much attention is given to the handful of ugly Jewish gangsters on the model of Bugsy Siegel. But the story of my great-uncle, Freeman Bernstein, is really the story of the guy who fell in the middle, the guy who is the artful grifter, the guy who is the con man, famous in vaudeville. He was a vaudeville agent for the biggest cigars, the loudest voice, the most outlandish dreams, and never paying his bills. He went on to be a card shark, an inept racetrack fixer. As Variety said, his horses were overeducated. Whenever they got into the far turn, they turned around to look at the tote board for the odds. And ultimately, as I detail in Hustling Hitler, he and a Confederate in Toronto cheated Adolf Hitler and the Nazis on a nickel deal in 1936. He was indicted for grand larceny in New York in 1936, took off for the Orient where he was the Jade King of China, and a year later was arrested on a fugitive warrant in Hollywood after leaving Mae West's apartment at midnight.
It read like the I can't think of the movie, but the person who can't get drowned in the water and keeps on bobbing up to the surface.
He was indomitable.
Yeah.
Not honest, but indomitable, and had a great sense of humor about it. And in writing the book, I really kept telling myself, you're not writing a Winston Churchill biography. If a detail isn't funny, don't put it in. So this is really just a rollicking story about what it is like to be Jewish in America, really, from 1900 to 1940, if you understand that while honesty is the best policy, it works a lot better if your father was a member of the Union League Club. If you're someone with a 5th grade education, the son of an immigrant peddler born in Troy, New York, you're just as honest as you need to be, which in the case of my great-uncle Freeman was often not very honest.
Well, he also reminded me that he broke the tradition of what a typical Jew would look like, and that he had his own style, and he had a fun about him that it was a private joke with him. And he understood human nature, and that, I think, is what really got him around.
Oh, he was both a genius and a charmer. I mean, the fact is that the first editor of Variety, back in 1905, when Variety was a vaudeville publication, fell in love with my great-uncle as a Damon Runyon-esque Broadway character before Damon Runyon even got to New York. And as a result, every month he would run a monologue of my great-uncle Freeman Bernstein reminiscing on his greatest hustles. I mean, one might be about he married a showgirl, non-Jewish, at least as non-Jewish as having a mother from County Cork, Ireland, can be, May Ward, and a lot of these monologues in Variety are about them fighting about money. A famous one was in 1912, Hammerstein's Roof, and this is the father of the Hammerstein of South Pacific in Oklahoma. In 1912 was the most fashionable place on Broadway. Everyone was there, and everyone was wearing a tuxedo. My great-uncle showed up wearing a dingy business suit, and the editor of Variety said, "What's the matter, Freeman? Can't afford a tux?" And Freeman said, "No, I got 3 at home." "Then why don't you wear them?" "I got this $100 fee, and if I take off my suit, I know my wife may overlook my clothes, so I have to wear this." And this book, we're working story after another. But he enjoyed being caught at the game almost more than he enjoyed actually bringing people off. He was an honorable. When he was in the chips, he would pay off everyone he owed money to, and so it was just. I just had a ball writing it. All these stories. It's a different part of America. I fell in love with vaudeville, and I also fell in love with what he and Showgirl Wyatt May Ward called their anniversary hustle. My great-uncle loved ocean liners, first-class staterooms. In fact, legend has it that the entire family in the 1920s had sheets and towels from the White Star Lines. In fact, when my great-uncle left a first-class stateroom, the only thing left was the box spring. But he and his wife did something called the anniversary hustle. On the first night out from port in New York, they would waltz into the first-class salon and announce that this was their anniversary and the champagne was on them. And the champagne was flow. And it was all legit. Freeman was paying for it. And the next day, the card games would start. And normally, if you're really rich and traveling first class across the Atlantic in the 1920s, you don't get involved when a stranger says to you, "Why don't we play a little cards for money?" But this wasn't a stranger. This was the guy who they were celebrating, their new friend who they were celebrating an anniversary with. As a result, he generally made 10 times the cost of the champagne by the time the boat docked in Cherbourg or Southampton. So I mean, the other wonderful thing about researching hustling Hitler is that if you're a con man, government agencies take a peculiar interest in you. And I found roughly 1,500 pages of government documents from the district attorney's case, mostly against him, for nicking Hitler on a nickel deal in 1936.
I think they should have offered him the Medal of Honor for what he did, because according to your resources and some of the things that I looked up, if it hadn't been for your great-uncle hustling the Sir, the war would have turned out a little bit differently.
Oh, well, I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it was clear that nickel, which lined the barrels of guns, was an important war material, and the Nazis were desperate for it. And instead of sending them 17 credit cards, he sent them 17 credit cards to the Canadian scrap metal. The Nazis were none too happy. They opened up these factories in Hamburg, and found very hard to get Canadian auto parts, and very hard to get rusted Canadian cans. And later said, if we put it down, there must have been some nickel there somewhere. But even then, I mean, after the governor of California refused to extradite him to New York, and Freeman Bernstein was a free man, he wrote a pamphlet called "Was Hitler Nickeljacked?" in which he claimed that the cargo had been switched on the high seas, which is a little implausible unless you think pirate ships were floating around the Atlantic in 1936 with 200 tons of Canadian scrap metal in the exact same barrels that he was designating for Germany. But he also, in this pamphlet, he also claimed that he met Herr Hitler personally. And very uncle telling Herr Hitler was English. As the German expert told me in researching the book, Hitler didn't even speak Polish German. But did go to Nazi Germany in late 1955 when, in a way that I didn't know, it was possible for a Jew with a foreign passport still to travel pretty unmolested through Germany. But the point about it is that this book is really, I have to tell you, my favorite con is, in 1929, he organized an Irish book under the name of Roger Orion. It was a glorious success until Mr. Orion disappeared with the Gate receipts. Boston papers quickly identified him, and they ran a whole series of articles about the manhunt for a person they called Mr. O'Bernstein. But the point about the book is that I had such fun doing it because he was an American original and someone who has been totally forgotten with the passage of time, but with a major figure of variety, show business, and in America in the 1910s and 1920s. And all of them in the world, someone who had a ball in hustling anyone who, shall we say, like Adolf.
So, Walter, please tell everybody where they can find you on the World Wide Web, where they can find the book, and are you going to be down at the festival?
I'm definitely going to be down at the Miami Book Festival, which I'm so looking forward to, and I'm going to be on a panel, and the date is going to be, for those who are marking their calendar, I believe I am there on Saturday, November 19th, and in the morning at 11 o'clock. Hustling Hitler is available wherever fine books are sold. It's also available where my book is sold. They sort of slipped it in with the fine books. It's also available on Amazon, and there's also a website called hustlinghitler.com. But for anyone really looking to understand the Jewish experience in America and to understand vaudeville and what it was really like to have outlandish dreams and not enough money in the first third of the 20th century, I really recommend it.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Walter. Ladies and gentlemen and people of all ages, you can listen to this interview with Walter Shapiro, Hustling Hitler, all over again at PassionateWorldRadioNetwork.com, Twitter.com/@CAULDWELL, Facebook.com/PWR Network LLC. Thank you all very much for listening. Please come and join Walter and I down at the International Miami Book Festival in Miami, Florida. If you have kids, not a problem. They have a large section of the festival devoted for kids and things to do, all the way up to teens. I know this is my 4th year. Thank you all very much for listening. And remember, please keep listening. Thank you.